Hello and welcome to episode 293, if you can believe it, of Sutton Impact Family Style. I'm Jason, and I'm once again joined by Fred from last week. How's it going, Fred?
Good. Hey, thanks again, Jason, for letting me fill in for your dad. Having big shoes to fill, obviously. Having to keep you in check. Of course.
Of course. So we're going to start today, because this is pseudo-slow week in NFL and NBA news. We have some stuff to talk about, but we're at the halfway point of the season. And this is somewhat stolen or homaged, if you will, from some other sports shows I've listened to, although everything is kind of homage from everything else. But we'll start at we're going to talk about our 5 teams we think could win the Super Bowl today. So do you want to start 1 through 5, or do you want to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1?
I think it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is probably more exciting.
Okay. All right, so my 5th team, and I'll go first, is the Cincinnati Bengals, who I picked to win the Super Bowl, oddly enough, on this podcast.
I had forgotten what AFC team picked you. Them and New Orleans were your two.
Yeah. Those have not turned out to be the best picks, but I do feel like, Cincinnati's 5-4, second in their division. Jamar Chase will be back. It seems like they came into the season with a couple of new offensive linemen. Burrow looked out of sync, but it seemed like those last couple of weeks with Chase, they were really doing well. And now it seems like they've really established Mixon. And I just think they're trending in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's a solid pick. I mean, I found it really tough to get number 5. It was, picking between like 5 or 6 different teams. And they were definitely part of that list, but I think your argument is right on. And they know what it takes to kind of get through the playoffs, and it's almost kind of works in their favor again, because they got written off really quick when they had such a rough start. They're almost kind of like the team that they were last year going into the second half of the season, where nobody expects them to do anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like I said, 5 for me was a really, really tough choice. But at the end of the day, because the second half of the season really turns into that, more of an emphasis on the run game, with the games being outside. Obviously, not so much for teams that play in a stadium, but in a dome. But I think that element of the second half of the season coming into play, I have to put the Ravens at 5. I always think the Ravens are a sneaky good team. And with the addition of Smith to solidify the middle of that defense, I think they really are a team that could be dangerous, mainly because there's nobody else like Lamar in the league. I know that Fields had 176, 178 rushing yards last week, but that, we'll see if that was just a fluke or if that's something that maintains. But Lamar is just I personally think, one of the most dangerous weapons in the league, and you match him up with a really solid defense, and I just think it's scary.
Agreed. My 15 was coming down. It was coming from the AFC North. It was either going to be Baltimore or Cincinnati. And Baltimore's obviously a game up on Cincinnati right now, and Jamar Chase is still out. And like you said, they had a Roquan Smith. Maybe it was my bias of picking Cincinnati in the beginning. I felt I needed to keep them.
That's fair. That's fair, because I was really tempted. I wasn't necessarily on record, so it's a lot easier for me to give you a hard time about your picks. I wasn't on record, but one of the picks that I had going into it, my son and I were actually in Vegas at the beginning of the year, and I put some money down on San Diego. In part because they have pretty good odds, but I also thought that they were going to like knock it out of the park this year, and that's not looking so good either.
I'm sure we'll probably have a lot of consensus once we get to the top 3. I will say my 5 choice and the 4 choice. I had 4 teams that I was debating as to who was going to go in those spots, and I went back and forth. And this one sort of hurts me, because I grew up not liking the Cowboys, but I have the Cowboys in 4th. They're 6-2.
Really?
Yeah, they're a 6-2 team. I think they have the best defensive player in football. No offense, TJ Watt, still love you. But Micah Parsons is an absolute beast. They can run the football. And that offense is just clicking right now. They're 6-2. They're a plus 50 point differential. And I just think that their arrow is pointing up. and I just like the way they're playing football right now. For me, it was down to them and the other team that I cut. I cut the Ravens and I cut the Dolphins, and you know, I just really like what Dallas is doing.
Yeah, I'm with you. The Dolphins were definitely getting heavy consideration out there. They, get that honorable mention for me too. The Cowboys were actually the other team that I had that I ended up in my honorable mention pile. I can definitely see where you're coming from, and I do think that their defense is, the front end of their defense is super scary, and I agree. Micah Parsons is a beast and unblockable. I get really nervous about their secondary. I mean, I know that Diggs gets a lot of pub for the number of interceptions, but we don't see as many times as how he gets smoked
Yeah,
because he is so chancy. So that's the thing about that concerns me with them is when they go up against a really good offense, an offensive coordinator, they're going to be able to kind of, dig, make that front seven almost not irrelevant, but take away the strength of the defense. I will say though, and not to be like back and forth, but to bolster your argument, Pollard might be the most underrated guy in the NFC East. I think he has the potential to really kind of change things for their offense.
yeah. I mean, they have. I don't think CeeDee Lamb is quite the guy they thought he was, but he's still a really good receiver. Justin Schultz gets the job done. Pollard, Ezekiel, that offensive line is playing well. And I will spoiler for the rest of the last three. I only have one other NFC team, so part of it was just who else do I think could possibly come out of the NFC. So that was part of my thought process. It's one, I was like, I have to have at least two teams from the NFC to make it look a little better.
That makes sense. I'm gonna, and this is after a great deal of consideration. It sounds kind of crazy, but I actually have Buffalo at 4.
Okay.
And the reason is, obviously, sounds like Josh Allen will be starting this week, even with that the injury that he suffered, which could potentially be bad. But the fact, kind of goes back to that point that I had mentioned with the second half of the season, where it becomes, a different type of game. A run game becomes really, really important. Buffalo not having a run game and all the injuries that they've sustained so far on their defense, especially up the middle with like Poyer's now out for a while. Milano, I don't know if he's back yet, but he's been out for a bit. Really, some concerns with that defense and not being able to maintain a run game other than Josh Allen really makes me nervous. Josh Allen is a beast. Their receivers, they are top notch. There's a lot of great things about Buffalo, and it's not just because I'm a New England, homer that I'm saying that. I would be happy for Buffalo. They've needed a chip for a long, long time.
A long, long
But
time. Yeah.
yeah. But the truth of the matter is, like, just that team with some of the challenges that they're up against right now, 4 I think is the right place for them.
Well, surprisingly enough, I had them at 3. So I pretty much echo most of your sentiment. The Josh Allen injury, whether or not he starts this week, I think they're hinting that he will. I think this would be a good week for him to take off. But,
Agreed.
Whatever. I mean, I know that, the Jets are 6-3, the Dolphins are 6-3, the Chiefs are 6-2. You probably want to do everything you can to preserve that home field advantage, because obviously going to Buffalo in January and December is not where people want to be.
Yeah.
But, I would take caution, but, I'm not a professional coach or coordinator or anything else, so, good for them. But yeah, same thoughts of yours would be mine. So that's why I had Buffalo at 3. And there's just the,
And I had heard, I think it was Steve Young who, and granted, we're not doctors, we're not in the locker room, I don't know, what that coaching staff knows, but I think it was Steve Young who had mentioned that he had that same injury in the past, and that, he was imploring Buffalo not to rush it back because it could be potentially, like, devastating. So I'm with you. Like, it's definitely nerve-wracking, if they're going to be kind of playing Russian roulette with the guy who makes their whole offense run.
And when he's 100%, they're obviously a contender. So I think, my Steelers did it, the Giants did it. Like, you can be a wild card and come out and win the Super Bowl. So I'd much rather, sit him for a couple weeks, have 100% Josh Allen, on a 10-11 win team that gets in the playoffs than, just trying to sneak out a few more wins. But also, while we're here, I guess, congratulations, New York Jets. You have no quarterback, and yet you beat the Bills last week. So
I know. We talked about it last week. NFL is just crazy. You really don't know what to expect or predict. And last week was another example of that coming to fruition.
the Jets have a lot of talent outside of the quarterback position, and they are really well coached. Like, really well coached. So
Yeah, I was a big Saleh fan when he was in San Fran. I was bummed. I was actually bummed that he took that job. I was glad he got an offer, but I was disappointed that he went into the AFC East because I got a lot of respect for him. So it's good to see him turn things around. Get some heat last year, but have confidence. Really backed his guys earlier this year with his comments to the media about taking names, and you can see why he would be somebody that players would want to rally behind.
And if I'm the Jets, obviously I'm hoping Zach Wilson somehow starts looking better. But I would also caution them. I'd be looking at the Indianapolis Colts right now, who play quarterback roulette every year and try to bring in a different veteran quarterback and how that's gone. And just make sure while you got this coach and this young talent, you figure out a way to bring in a quarterback that can work. And not retreads or.
Yeah.
And selfishly, as an AFC, my team plays in AFC, so I don't really care if he's good or not. But it doesn't look like Zach Wilson's going to be very good.
Yeah, I'm thankful that he does give us, he does give the Patriots a chance to win each time we play them because they have, like you said, they have a lot of good things happening for the Jets.
Yeah. So you're number 3.
I had at 3. I had Philadelphia.
Okay.
1, 2, and 3 were this whole process was tough actually, but again, trying to be fair and critical. Philadelphia is just a team. 3 is still good. Maybe because they're not 1 or 2. I think that the reason they have a chance to be super successful is because of their running game,
which is incredible. Yeah,
it's great.
They're plus 90 points. They're 8-0. They've won 4 on the road, 4 at home. And they've been fantastic. I have them at number 2, which seems silly because you read those stats and you're like, well, they're number 1, right? It's like,
Yeah, when I had to look at 1, 2, and 3 because kind of like you said, going around to the top. But when I went to 1, 2, and 3, I had to look at okay, if these teams play against each other, who's winning? So I had San Fran at 2.
Okay.
There's something about San Francisco where, Doc, Jimmy G, all you want, guy figures out a way to.
He's had a lot of success.
Put his team, in a place where maybe he's not going to be the one that's going to be not going to throw in the final touchdown to win the game, but he's at least making sure that they're in a spot that somebody on special teams or somebody on defense or somebody on offense can make a play to win the game for him. It's an act that is beyond stats for a quarterback. As long as you don't lose the game, you don't necessarily have to win it for us. And he embodies that over and over again. I really think that the addition of McCaffrey, to that team adds an element that they haven't had before, and obviously something they were searching for by putting Debo in the backfield and trying to get a playmaker, get the ball into his hands as much as possible. Now it eases him up. I know that when he was end of last year, there was a lot of complaints from his camp about not wanting to be a running back. So now he can spend less time doing that. and really focus on the parts that he enjoys. But now you look at the playmakers they have. Hopefully, Kittle can kind of come back to being that guy where he's not just like shows up every 4 weeks.
I think Kittle might be what Kittle is from this point on. I think sadly, I would like it if he
Yeah.
was. I just feel like he's in that old boxer phase of his career. Sadly, where he can still get it done from time to time, but he's never going to go back to being despite I think he's still under 30. But I don't think we're ever going to see the old kill again. But again, if he could get it together for a couple games in the playoffs, you're right. Because with Ayuk, Samuel, and McCaffrey, I mean, that's a nasty 1, 2, 3.
Right, and their defense is still solid. I love, and I would think that you would love the guy too. And I'm blanking on his name, but the safety that they have, who
Oh yeah, the one
spends
that
his time working out with
Palomalo. Yeah.
Palomar. So he's all over the place. I mean, that guy is like every time I watch one of their games, he's like in every spot where something's happening. He's making things happen. He's forcing turnovers. Up front, they're stout. Like I just think that team is set to be the team to come out of the NFC.
So I imagine we both have the same team at number 1.
KC.
Kansas City, yeah.
I hate it. But like, if you're being objective, like you gotta put them on one.
Especially because they got rid of Tyreek Hill. You brought in Juju, Scandling. Now you added Kadarius Toney. It looks like that offense is really starting to click and come together.
Yeah, and
like Juju's been, everyone in fantasy, we'll talk about later. Everyone thought Juju was going to be the perfect complement, but it took him a few weeks to really get going. But now it seems like he's really a part of that offense.
Yeah, and you think about it, you used to just go into that and be like, okay, we got to have somebody play deep to keep an eye on Tyreek Hill, and we got to have somebody play, short, middle to cover Kelsey. And now they still have kind of a deep threat in Hardman. Granted, he's not on the level of Tyreek Hill, but he's got the speed where you still have to honor that. And you have MVS, who's also got that kind of speed and quickness. But now you add another guy into the middle, that middle of the field kind of stuff with Juju, and I don't know how you could give a defense 13 players, and I still don't know if they can cover the field. So where Patrick Mahomes can't find somebody who's open, who's going to be able to make a big play for them.
And again, there's a giant caveat because he's had like 4 good games his entire career, but Kadarius Toney is incredible with the ball in his hands, and he's fast and he's quick and he's Tyreek Hill fast almost. So if he stays healthy for them and he integrates into their offense, they're going to be unstoppable.
Agreed, and we got to just see 1 or 2 glimpses of it while he was in New York. I remember watching maybe 2 or 3 years ago him in Florida, and he just jumped off the screen. You were like, who is this dude? So yeah, it's frightening that he went there. Kudos to Brett Bean, the GM there, for making that happen and just continuing to not stand pat or be complacent, looking for ways to constantly be improving that team. I think, I'm with you. Their defense is good enough where they are going to keep, even a great offense to, under 25 points. And they have their offense. I'd be shocked if they score below 25 points in any games going into the playoffs. I know that they lost to Indianapolis. They had a bad game there. But I think that once you get to the second half of the season in the playoffs, those guys should be honed in, not bored, and walk into each game ready to go.
I will say that Indianapolis loss in a crazy NFL season, that Indianapolis loss is one of the craziest results of the year.
Yeah.
Because that's a really bad football team.
Out of my eliminator thing. You ever do one of those eliminator challenges?
I have not done one of those. I'm aware of them, though. They're really cool.
Yeah. But, then you get something like that, and you're like, how is this even possible? But yeah, and, Andy Reid is an outstanding coach, knows how to get his team. And quite honestly, as much as, for both of us, with Kansas City being in the AFC, as much as we're going to root against them because it means bad things for our team, the fact of the matter is Patrick Mahomes is somebody that any NFL fan can get behind, root for. Seems like a really good dude.
Yeah, all he needs to
And
do is disown his brother and divorce his wife, and then he'd be the perfect likable superstar. You know.
yeah, so
Those are
I
the only
think
two
that
things dragging him
he's
down, or that they won't shut up.
yeah. But I definitely think that he's got the right attitude to keep that team in check on the field. And, like we both talked about, they just have too many studs. Defensive line is stout. And
And
they're going to be
between
tough to knock out.
and between their three running backs, they have enough running back to get it done, along with Mahomes running when he has to.
Yeah, because you look at those running backs, I mean, they're all different, right?
Yeah.
You got Pacheco, who's going to just, pound it in your face. You got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's going to, be shifty. And then you got even a more elusive guy in McKinnon. So they have all that they need in the backfield.
And they can do that hot hand
Run
approach.
for 12 yards every time that you give him it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why Pachinko is not their starting running back all the time. He's the scary guy on their backfield, but, whatever.
Hey, I'll be happy with that. Like you kind of referenced with the fantasy thing, I got him sitting in a taxi slot, so I'm good with that.
Yeah. Well, real quick, our last NFL thing of the week. If you had to pick an MVP today, who's the MVP of the season?
Oh, that was another one. And it's so funny because I hate the notion of it's got to be a quarterback. It's got to be a quarterback. When is there ever going to be a running back?
Yeah.
You got a running back who runs for 2,000 yards and he doesn't even in the top three. That just seems kind of crazy to me. But when you actually go through the process of having to break it down, and this is the first time I've ever really been challenged to do that, it really boils down to the quarterbacks. I was looking at Tyreek Hill because of the impact that it's had.
Oh, yeah.
On Miami, but they went 0-3 without Tua, right? So Tyreek was still in the field. He was still getting his yards, but they didn't win. The impact that a receiver has just isn't great enough to put him in that spot. So as I was going through, it really boils down to three guys for me. It's Mahomes, Allen, or Lamar, because those are guys that, quite honestly, I just don't think you can find that same player. Hurts is up there, but I'm thinking, and I love Hurts. I love his story. I love the fact that he faced such adversity at Alabama and then knocked it out of the park in Oklahoma, and then he's coming to the league and proven a ton of people wrong. Really, really big fan of Hurts. But I still feel like you could take an above-average quarterback, put him in that system, and have success, and maybe even more success with the receivers that they have. I mean, that's Hurts' only downfall is he's not a great passer of the ball. But when you look at Lamar, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes, I think you just have three guys who are just at a whole nother level in terms of what they can do in impacting the game. And when you look at it that way, based on what we were talking about with our expectations in terms of how the season goes, the further your team or the better your team is record-wise, it also ties into your likelihood of being an MVP. And I would say Mahomes is going to be the one who's going to end up getting it, even though I really think that it should be Josh Allen. So I think Mahomes is going to get it. I think Josh Allen should.
Okay. I think, again, I don't know why I love defense so much, but I know there's a defensive player of the year and an offensive player of the year, but it seems silly if the quarterback wins an MVP and doesn't win offensive player of the year. That just seems dumb to me. But if you're the most valuable player in your own offense, you should win all the offensive player awards. But I know that's not how they do it. So I like I think Michael Parsons is the MVP of the season. But like you, I think it'll come down to those two quarterbacks, and a lot of times it comes down to narrative. And I think people really want Josh Allen. It feels like this entire offseason, people want him to be the guy for whatever reason. Sometimes that narrative just gets caught up, and they're just they want to fulfill the prophecy or whatever they want to do, and I feel like it's Josh Allen. It was his to lose from the beginning of the season, is what I would say. And if he can continue, if he had a few bumps, obviously the last Jets game, but I think if he recovers, I think that's your MVP.
Fair. I was actually giving some consideration to Russell Wilson because of the impact that he's had on the Seattle Seahawks, the positive impact. Like, it would be like a really weird way of getting to it, but like Russell Wilson is actually Seattle's MVP.
Yes, because he's helping that team immensely. And I suppose while we're here, before we move on, I guess we both should talk about the 6-3 Seattle Seahawks and then the 7-1 Minnesota Vikings, who weren't even mentioned in our honorable mentions. And I think Seattle's a great story. I just don't see them winning it. And then Minnesota's Minnesota. Like, I don't care if they're 15-1 or 16-1. I can't see Kirk Cousins taking that team to the promised land.
Yeah, I immediately crossed off Minnesota and Tennessee because of the divisions that they play in. It's kind of like, it's kind of like TCU being considered for, the college football playoffs. It's just like once you get there, the competition that you're going to be going against is going to make you look foolish. And I think that's what would happen with Minnesota. Seattle I almost found myself putting them up there, but I don't know if it's just trying to make sure like I don't get duped. Is this that kind of thing? But Seattle, it does look like a good team, especially a good young team.
Yeah.
Other than Smith.
Yeah, I just thought we'd throw it out there. Like we said, it wasn't a giant sports week, but I have to bring this up every week until it stops being the thing. The number one team in the Western Conference is the 10-3 Utah Jazz.
Yeah, them and the Bucks are the only two teams with 10 wins this far into the season. It's just mind-boggling and crazy. They have, they've just taken the whole league by shock and by storm. Like, I don't know. Like, it's, I was thinking about this, and is there a potential that this season, with some of the success some of these teams are having, and with the kind of the last week of the Nets, last week and a half of the Nets' success in terms of like them kind of turning things around without Kyrie.
Yeah.
Is there something that could come out of this in terms of like the notion of like, hey, listen, we don't need stars, we need a good team. Like, basketball was always considered kind of a team game, and then obviously over the last like 3 decades, it's become very much a
big three.
Yeah, big three, star-driven, kind of league. Everybody's been led to believe that you need your big three to compete for a championship. And it was proven right for a while. But it goes to the point of, if you have a team that is a great team and 7 deep into the bench, are they just built for the regular season like Utah always has been? And they're going to get it handed to them come the playoff time? Or is this something that... maybe I'm just kind of overanalyzing things.
Well, the crazy thing about Utah is you traded for all these picks, and your most valuable pick is still your first-round pick this year, with the giant Frenchman who just continues to shine and look amazing. And then they're about 4 players deep in this draft. So, all the other picks, like Cleveland is good, and they have Donovan Mitchell, so you're probably not getting a very high Cleveland pick. Minnesota, luckily, is terrible. At 5-8, and you traded your other player for all their picks. But I mean that you thought you would get all those picks, you could move around, add some players through the years, but this would be where you'd add your superstar. But at 10-3, and the way they're playing, I mean, really well coached, and you just have to it's crazy. I don't even know how to. Like I said, I just had to bring it up because I'm like, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah, and especially when you look through the standings and you see like you said, like the Jazz on the top at 10-3, and then you look down at the bottom and you got the Lakers at 2-10. Like that just doesn't seem.
And the Warriors at 5-7.
Yeah, Warriors 5-7, Rockets at 2-10, which is, okay, that's not a surprise. I mean,
No.
I don't think they have anybody older than 22 on their roster. Um, speaking of Houston, just out of curiosity, is it if you're a Houston fan, if you're a Houston sports fan, is winning the championship in baseball enough to get you through the nights, knowing that the next two important dates for over the next 6 months are reporting to spring training and the NFL draft? Like, you have nothing else to look forward to.
I suppose. I mean, the thing about Houston, though, you've got, Jalen Green, you got Smith, and you got a couple of nice young players to watch, right? And I think you can bank on, we're going to have another high pick. We have a chance of getting this incredible Frenchman. We got Jalen Green. We got Jabari Smith. We have something we're building. So I feel like, there's always the excitement of what could be, right? Because they've got some picks. They've got some young players. And this is a very exciting draft. So I feel like I'd be pretty excited as a Houston Rockets fan.
Okay, that's fair.
And if I'm a Texans fan, I'm like...
You did also... Did you mention Sengun? I don't know if you mentioned.
I didn't even mention him, no.
Like, he's somebody to watch out for, too. He's their center right now.
Yeah. And if I'm the Texans, I'm thinking Pierce looks great. Got a steal with him. We're oddly competitive. And this is a nice quarterback draft. We put Bryce Young on that offense. Who knows?
Man, you just talked me off the ledge if I was living in Houston, so I appreciate that. That's
I'm trying to help Houston people out,
Speaking of NBA stuff, one thing that I found really interesting and kind of looking at, some of the stories and things that have been going on in the league. Just a couple weeks ago, October 22nd, Silver came out and referenced the fact that they had actually gone through and looked at the possibility of a relegation type system, but they feel like it won't work. That the G League just wouldn't be the right facet to make that happen. I only mention it because I find the explanation to be one that, as a sensible sports fan, no, it wouldn't be the G League. Obviously, we all know that. Like, G League would still have to stay there. It would be the addition of a number of other franchises. But, it's about the money. Like, I mean, if you just look at this year, like, the Lakers would be in consideration for getting relegated in a franchise that's probably worth, $4 or $5 billion, maybe more.
Easily, yeah.
Is going to get relegated and suddenly have their net worth drop down quicker than FTX.
Yeah, I don't know what parameters you would set about, but I feel like maybe you set it up. You can't have the number one overall pick back to back. And then if you're in the top 5 2 years in a row, you can't be in the top 5 3 years in a row. So that the best pick you could have is 6. So that even if the lottery balls fell, you were at 4, they would just move you back to 6 and move the other 2 teams up. Like, if there's ways you could sort of, punish losing, I guess. But I don't really know how you fix it, And again, as I think I said a couple weeks ago, I still can't predict Victor, the giant Frenchman. He's a franchise-changing talent. Yes. He's going to be a global superstar. It's in, we talked about with Utah, they're 10-3 right now. It's in their best interest to be bad and have the best shot at getting him. It just is. I mean, you're gonna sell more jerseys. You're gonna get more nationally televised games. You're gonna get superstars wanting to come play with him. I mean, it just makes sense.
Yeah, have you seen some of his highlights? It is ridiculous. I'm gonna take a stab at it. Wembanyama.
I think that sounds right.
But yeah, it's a taller. He's like a taller, more.
He's a taller KG.
Yeah, with like an incredible handle.
And he's got a little bit of Durant. He's a little Kevin Durant and Kevin Garnett, but taller.
Yeah, it's crazy. Um, you got a sweet stroke from the outside, and
And you watch him
just
like he can hit pull ups. He can he can be in the corner. He can spot up. He can hit. He can hit fadeaways. Like he's got. And you watch him when he drives to the hole. He's got like veteran moves already, like the little fadeaway and like little mini hooks and like just some of the footwork stuff that you would expect, a 17-year-old not to have developed at this point. He's got it all.
yeah, I think that's one of the advantages of playing overseas, right? Like
Yeah.
they're playing against adults, like pros, and whether you're young like Luca was, it was crazy. I had heard that he had started playing pros at like 15.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're going to get your butt whooped and you're going to get thrown around by a bunch of grown adults because they're not going to want to see you show them up. But at the same time, you're definitely going to be able to, learn how to play at a professional level. So it is frightening whoever gets them. They're not going to be walking into, like, a 3-year kind of thing, OKC is going to be having with, Chet if he comes back, when he comes back healthy. He's still got a year or two before he's going to be, scratching the surface of what he can do. This guy, can come in and make some pretty immediate
Impact. Yeah.
impact. So,
And the other thing, when you look at Chet and, you think back to Greg Oden, you look at some of these other really tall people, when you watch them run, there's something, physically it doesn't look smooth, right? There's something about their body, but this kid looks like, he runs like he's 6'4", 6'5". Like there's no weird, awkward, body stuff at this point. He's a little thin, obviously, but I don't think he doesn't, he doesn't have that same, like, you worry when you watch him run, you're like, this guy's going to get hurt. Like, he doesn't have that to him.
yeah, I agree. And I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, just with the angle that we get to see most of the games from, on TV, like that awkward, like almost high knees kind of like run along the floor, like, yeah, some of the big guys, popping their, trotting the feet down and stuff. Yeah, he is the definition of smooth, which is crazy because somebody who's over 7 feet tall, being told, being categorized as smooth makes me feel self-conscious because I'm not even smooth enough 5 times.
All right, well, we're going to do... Well, I have 2 entertainment moments. I don't have any food. I don't know if you have anything. But after that, we're going to do our fantasy football talk. So just so people know what's happening moving forward. And we are well aware that people say the worst thing people do is talk about fantasy. But that's why we're putting it at the end. But on Apple TV, I watched all of Bad Sisters, which is a 10-part murder mystery comedy set in Ireland. And it was delightful. I really enjoyed it. I don't really want to talk too much about it because, you have a group of 5 sisters, you have a murder mystery, and I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to spoil anything or ruin anything. But it's on Apple TV Plus, I guess.
Murder mystery comedy, I love that. Very much akin to Knives Out. I don't know if you had caught that maybe 2 years ago in the theaters. That I loved, so I think I gotta check that out.
Yeah. And then the other one was Weird, the Weird Al story starring Daniel Radcliffe, which is I guess, as he points out, it's a biography film starring Daniel Radcliffe about him that has 22% real story. And it's basically sort of it's the Weird Al story, but told the way Weird Al would tell the story. And, he's sort of making fun of all the VH1 stuff and, every other, biopic you read about, the drug abuse and the women and the crazy stuff. But Weird Al had none of that. So he just sort of adds it all together. And it's fantastic. It's really funny. It's sort of in the lines of, any sort of spoofy, goofy comedy with lots of little, it's got tons of cameos. Jack Black's got a small part, Patton Oswalt, Josh Groban, like just so many people. Yeah, and it's just really well done. And Daniel Radcliffe is fantastic. And he's an actor that, I feel like he does what I would want all successful actors to do, which is it seems like he just picks parts he wants to do. He's not worried about his brand. I know he's got the Harry Potter money coming in forever, so he's set for life. But when you look at the choices he makes, like Swiss Army Man, where he plays, a dead person who basically communicates through farts through an entire movie, like that's not something a Will Smith would do, you know? I just think Radcliffe
I
loves
agree.
acting.
Everything I've seen him.
Yeah, I just think he picks parts that he wants to do. Like he's like, I have all the money in the world. I'm going to pick parts that I want to play because they're going to make me happy, and I feel like that's what he's been doing, and I really respect that.
Yeah, agreed. And I got big into Graham Norton's show for a while, and he was on there all the time. And everything that he at least displays, not necessarily on the screen, but where he's being a little bit more insightful about who he is. Really get the impression that he is just a down to earth guy, which is, I would think, really, really difficult considering the fame that he experienced as a kid.
As a young kid, yeah. I'm not sure how old he was in the Harry Potter movie, but in the first one, he looks like he's like, what, 9 or 10?
Yeah, I would say around there, yeah.
Yeah. And he's been, and that's and those movies were beloved by children, beloved by adults, beloved in all sorts of countries. I mean, and he's been worshipped. But again, like I said, I just really enjoy his picks.
Yeah, nice. My entertainment minute is kind of the opposite. It's really quick. Like I saw the preview for The Menu.
Oh, that was fantastic.
I have zero interest in going to see it.
Oh, you do?
So I'm just gonna say it. Yeah.
Oh, I want to see it.
No, I'm not going to watch some like twisted thing where people get invited to some house and they become the menu. Like I'm not interested. Like that's clearly what that's all about. Maybe I'm off, but if I am off, then horrible job to the people who did the advertising.
Well, I'm pretty sure the people that did The Menu basically saw all the signs that say "Eat the Rich" and were like, "Yeah, let's do it." And that's the premise of the movie. All right, let's talk fantasy football. So we'll talk to you next week if you're not interested in listening, and we have no offense taken. Well, first I just want to say,
big thing for us, right, is obviously to endorse
Dynasty.
the Dynasty League first. Like if you haven't done a Dynasty League, Jason and I have been lucky enough to have one going for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. I'm hoping it's 3 because of the success of my team and my continued process of rebuilding. But the joy of the Dynasty League is you keep your team and you get draft picks, which you can trade or keep, and you have a taxi squad of rookies. So basically, if you're in a regular fantasy league and you draft your team and it's week 4 and there's 2 teams in your league that are fantastic, you've got 4 guys on injured reserve and your team is floundering, you're kind of checked out mentally, right? I was in the past anyway. Whereas with Dynasty, I realize I'm building towards the future. So then I can start making trades for future draft picks. I can start scouting people's taxi squads and see if I can, steal somebody off their squad. Low value trade. Like it just keeps you active and involved.
Yeah, and it also kind of like adds in other elements, right? Like I was never really into college football, mainly growing, spending my entire life up here in the Northeast. We don't have
UMass
college football.
Yeah,
we got UMass who won a Division 2A championship. Is their claim to fame. I don't know since they went to 1A like 10, since they went to Division 1 8 or 10 years ago. I'm not sure if they've won a game yet. They might be very much like your Dynasty League. But anyways, just the lack of a college football program other than maybe BC every once in a while. Like it's just never been ingrained in me. But being in this league, like now I'm paying attention to guys who are coming into different programs at the college level, thinking about like, hey, listen, this guy Bowers down in Georgia, this guy's incredible. How do I set myself up for in 3 years to be able to draft him? Like, there's elements to being in this league that make it so fun, enjoyable, and really like full scope that it's as close. I kind of feel like it's as close to being like a GM as you could be without having to like worry about getting fired.
And we are, for the record, we're full dynasty, so you can keep your entire team. So you can also develop like not you don't I mean you just you develop attachments to players where you're really because I've seen some dynasties where you can keep up to 3 players or keep 4 players, but we keep the entire roster.
Yep.
And we have draft picks. You can trade your draft picks up to like 3 years in advance. So I have people's 2025 picks and 2024 picks already.
Yep. Yep. You're right on though about developing attachments. Like and that becomes so hard when like you draft a guy and you're like, oh man, I know this guy's gonna be great. I held on to Lavicious
Chenault. Yeah.
I apologize for absolutely killing his first name, but I had like trade offers for the first 2 or 3 years that the guy was in the league. And I was like, no, I'm sticking with this guy. I drafted him. He's going to be great. I know it. He's like this freak athlete. They just need to find the right system. Oh, man, they got a new coach in Jacksonville. He's going to unlock the secret. Yeah, that was a mistake. But, like, if it wasn't for the fact that I had drafted him, I would have never been so attached and probably would have traded him years ago.
Yeah, I had the same problem with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who I finally traded away this year.
It is definitely something. I mean, I think everybody in the league that we're in kind of went into it. I don't think anybody had done a dynasty league before then.
No, I haven't.
Talking to everybody, I think they've all really come to realize, like, if you're going to do fantasy football, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, because like I said, this year, I think I'm pretty low. I'm playing Fred this week though, which is just ironic. We didn't plan this out. It just happened that we're playing each other. And I'm not even playing a kicker this week. That's how confident I am.
The thing is, though, you're still in the playoff hunt. You're 4-5.
Yeah.
I want to say you're in 8th place.
I think so. Yeah, but there's 3 teams that are dominant, and then there's everybody else. Yeah, because the team in first place has scored 500 more points than I have. And if you play fantasy, you usually score between, like 100 and 180 points a week?
Yeah, I would say that's a good scope, 100 to 180, like somewhere in there, yeah.
So he has scored a solid 4 weeks more points than I have. But I have 3 first-round picks this year. Because I am the Philadelphia 76ers of our team. I'm the process. I haven't changed my team name yet, but that's what I've been for the entire time. I didn't like my team year one.
Some other teams have way more points than you, right? But
yeah.
Like historically, I'm willing to bet that you've had more picks than like you could take like four other teams and put them together.
Yeah.
And they haven't had as many draft picks as you have.
Well, I traded away most of my good players my first year in the league, like 3 weeks into the season.
Yeah, I was going to say 2 weeks in. 3 weeks, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe it was 2 weeks in, yeah. And for all the great trades I've made, I've also made some blunders, so, And my biggest mistake is I had the first overall pick. I was tanking for Taylor. And I took Edwards-Helaire over Jonathan Taylor because he went to the Chiefs, and I bought into that hype. But again, it's so much fun. And again, we're not going to go into specifics about, who's on our team and all that other stuff. It's more just about like selling the dynasty process to people because I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. It definitely, if you are somebody who enjoys getting into fantasy sports, but then like Jason had mentioned, you get 3 or 4 weeks in and you're like, oh man, I made some horrible picks this year. I guess there's always next year. This is definitely the way to go. It keeps you involved and engaged the whole time through. And it ends up being fun because, and maybe, people are in a league where they have, they're redrafting with the same guys every year. But it is fun to kind of like see how each, team manager kind of like manages their team differently, what works, what doesn't, kind of planning for the future. And that balance of planning for the future and trying to be good now is so interesting and so enjoyable. And sometimes just super frustrating. but a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess my one personal fantasy thing is I have been doomed at quarterback for 3 seasons now. Where my quarterbacks, who normally score, what, about 20 points a game?
Yeah, it's a good average. Yeah.
My quarterbacks average like 8.2 points a game.
Yeah. Wasn't there a week that you had a quarterback last year that ended up being negative for the week?
I've had numerous weeks where I've had either one or negative points out of my quarterback, which is supposed to be the easiest position to fill, but it just doesn't work, you know. And this year I invested in.
I was frustrated by Herbert last week because he only got 11.
Yeah.
I can't, getting below that. So, yeah, you figure that out, and your team's going to be scary.
I think so. Well, I think we're going to get back to the rest of the college football Saturday, which is really kind of a boring week this week. No real big games are happening. I mean, I guess the biggest thing is Alabama's technically losing to Ole Miss at halftime. But, this is just a down year for the Bama. But, yeah, everybody have a good week, and we'll see you next week.